Namaste and good morning, everyone. So as you know, in our last class, we finished this great Upanishad, the Shvetashvarta Upanishad. And today we are just going to have some discussion on that Upanishad. Okay, we're going to see what we have learned from this great book. So, but before we do that, let's do some prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo, Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhurбhavасваha Tatsavitra Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yo Nah Prachodayat Asto Ma Sadgamya Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya Mrityurma Amritam Gamya Om Sahna Bhavtu Sahna Bhunaktu Sahviryam Karvavai तेजस्वी नावधीतमस्तु मा विद्वेषावहि ओम शांति 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 ओम Shvetashvarta Upanishad. Where does this name come from? And what does it mean? The name of the sage who composed it is Shvetashvarta. Shvetashvarta. Ashva means the horses or the senses, and Shvet means white. White means pure, sattvic. So that's the kind of a rishi who gave us this knowledge. As you know, we have 4 Vedas, and distributed among those 4 Vedas are 108 Upanishads. So this is one of the Upanishads. Upanishads are also called Gyan Kand. And what are the other 2 Kands? Karam Kand and Upasana Kand. So Gyan Kand. So which Ved it belongs to? It belongs to Yajurveda. See, there's a Rig Ved, Yajurved, Sam Ved, and Atharva Ved. So this Upanishad, the Shvetashvarta Upanishad, belongs to the Yajurved. It can also be classified as a Shaiv Upanishad. It is not only a major Upanishad, but also considered one of the earliest Upanishads. See, there are some major Upanishads, some minor Upanishads. So this is one of the major Upanishads. And the emphasis in this Upanishad, as we saw, was upon Lord Shiva, and in some respects with a subtle hint of devotional theism. Because a lot of people, they think that Upanishads are only pure knowledge. No, there's a lot of devotion we saw in this Upanishad. So from a historical perspective, it has a great significance because it contributed to the rise of Shaivism as a major Hindu religious sect and the popularity of Lord Shiva, who was once feared and revered alike by the Rig Vedic Indians as a part of the Hindu Trinity. This Upanishad is divided into 6 chapters and contains total 113 verses. First chapter we saw has 16 verses, second chapter 17 verses, third chapter 21 verses, fourth 22 verses, fifth chapter 14 verses, and last chapter is the longest with 23 verses. So altogether 113 verses into these 6 chapters. The significance of this Upanishad lies in the fact that we saw that it come across almost all the basic teachings and concepts of Bhagavad Gita. Karam also, Gyan also, Bhakti also. The difference is basically in the names only. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna describes himself as the Bhagwan, the Supreme Lord of the universe, whereas here it is Lord Shiva, who is the Lord of all, the master of the eminent and transcendent reality. By knowing whom, one can attain Brahma. This is what we learned. Lord Shiva is referred especially as Ishwar, who is the awakened Brahma, the being, the universal soul, who initiates the process of creation, having woken up. Because this Upanishad started out by students asking the question to the Rishi, who created this? Where did this all come from? Very basic but deep questions. We have all the basic concepts of Shaivism here. The Pashu, the Pash, and the Pati. These were the three terms we learned. Pashu is the individual soul. Pash is the bond that keeps us chained. Pash. This Pash is the bond that keeps us chained to the world of illusion and mortality. Even though we are immortal, our real nature is Atma, which is nothing but Paramatma, but we are bound here because of this Pash. And Pati is Lord Shiva himself, the controller of the universe who ultimately delivers his dear devotees from bondage. This is what we learned in these beautiful verses. We also came across the elements of bhakti, or devotion, in this beautiful scripture. We are told that Brahm can be realized through the mind as well as through our heart. There was a greater signification or the importance of feeling in the form of devotion or love as the means to self-realization. Ishwar, Prakriti, and the individual soul are the triad in which Ishwar is above all, while the other two engage themselves in enacting their respective roles. So Ishwar, Prakriti, and individual soul. Freedom from the hold of Prakriti is possible for the individual soul through the grace of God. This is what we learned here. We also came across reference to the wheel of creation, in which the hub and the circumference are Brahma, while the middle part is the manifestation of Prakriti with all its diversity. There were beautiful verses about that. Long verses giving the description of this creation. The law of karma is also dealt with in some detail in this Upanishad. The individual soul, having come into this world, wanders about according to the nature of its deeds, assuming various forms in various conditions. Especially in chapter 5, verses 7 to 11, we saw the detail of this. He is bound to the world because he becomes the enjoyer. and assumes responsibility for his actions without recognizing the invisible hand of God in his life. So that means when we turn our face towards the Prakriti, we become bound. We become the doer and the enjoyer, and we become bound, and we forget our real nature. We were also introduced to the concept of breath control and some techniques of yogic meditations. All of this knowledge just stays only in words unless we experience it ourselves through meditation. And meditation becomes easier when we have a proper breath control. There are verses extolling the significance of syllable Om and the greatness of Savitra, the sun god. That was an acknowledgement of the fact that the science of self-realization was pioneered by him among the mortals. So you can see that this great Upanishad has touched upon so many topics. And it's not a small Upanishad. And in the beginning, we learned that the sage Shvetashvarta got this knowledge of Brahma, which is very sacred and revered by many great sages through his penance and through God's grace. And he taught it very well to his disciples. He did not keep it to himself. And he did not get it just begging for it. He did go through the penance, the tapasya. But tapasya alone doesn't do it. We need the grace of God also. This is what we learned, and this is what we need to do too. We got to see, is our life as a tapasvi? Are we living a life of a yogi or a bhogi? In all our different activities, we got to see that. Why do we eat? Why do we sleep? Why do we do different activities? Is the motive behind that is tapasya or bhog? So this great Rishi told us from his live example, if you want to have this experience, you can have it too. But you got to have a life of a tapasvi. Because from this verse, we learn that this Upanishad was attributed to a sage who was pure, Shvetashvarta, or to his line of ancient spiritual teachers. And then later on, he taught it to his disciples. There are some special features other than what I just mentioned earlier, that the Supreme God or Brahma can be called by various names. Even though God is one, but the names can be many. It could be Shiva, Rudra, or any other name. And another feature is the prominent conception of the bhakti is indirectly and some places directly voiced in the form of upasana. The big portion on the upasana. So there is no room for guesswork. He used the word parubhakti also. Parubhakti, the term is used at the end of the 6th chapter. There are many words which voice submission to God or Brahma. Words such as Sharanam or prapadya, this concept of devotion later found with a very profound expression in the Bhakti Sutras and other textbooks of Bhakti. Another specialty of this Upanishad lies in its giving importance to the form of God. Fullness or murtitva, the murti of a form or God. Because often Brahma is described as formless in other important Upanishads. Since it is difficult to concentrate the mind on and or to show devotion to a formless Brahma, the Shvetashvarta Upanishad ascribes various forms to God while expounding on devotion. It also describes various characteristics or manifestations of God also, mentioning that he has knowledge and power. The Upanishad also presents God as the creator and sustainer of the universe, while describing various powers of God. Drives home the point with the similes, beautiful similes we saw in this Upanishad. As God having thousands of heads, Sahasar Shirsha, to denote God as the universal witness for everything going on in the universe. And God's having thousands of feet also, to indicate his omnipresence. And when we studied Bhagavad Gita, we saw over there also Arjuna, when he is describing God's form, universal form, he sees thousands of heads, thousands of feet, thousands of arms. So this Upanishad mentions that God is Param Purusha, is shining in his glory beyond the darkness of ignorance or tamas. God is the one who controls the material energies of the universe through his characteristic maya or illusion of the world. But at the same time, God is not bound by his maya, as us human beings are. Why? Because he's the controller of the maya. We are under the grips of the maya. He is maya atit or maya adhyesha, maya adhyaksha. He owns the maya. And he is capable of giving salvation to us human beings. Then there was a mention of Sankhya also. Sankhya. Sankhya means the Sankhya, enumeration. So that's why a lot of enumeration in this in these verses over here. So there are many verses in this Upanishad. They have some counting of things. Counting. 8, 6, 13, 15, counting. So that's why the word Sankhya was extended to intellectuals, while Sankhya is dualistic. One hymn of this universe, this Upanishad says, sages engaged in deep meditation realized the secret Atma Shakti of God. Meditation. Even this morning after the meditation, somebody asked me, what is really happening? Who is watching whom? Even when we are traveling inside our body. Eventually, when we go into the deep meditation, which is samadhi, Atam Shakti of God. This is what we experience, and this is what this Rishi mentioned. The sages engaged in deep meditation realize the secret of God. So through meditation, we can find this secret, which is called Atam Shakti. Atam Shakti of God is hidden secretly in the meditator's own inner nature. We don't have to run outside. Sure, it's outside also, but it's a lot easier to just get in touch with it inside us. By sitting still, watching what's happening, controlling our mind, controlling our intellect. It's right there. We don't have to go far. Then in the 4th verse of the 3rd chapter and the 12th verse of the 4th chapter, he says, Rudra saw the birth of Hiranyagarbha. And then later on in the 18th verse of the 6th chapter, very clearly he says, Parmeshwar created Brahma. When seen in context of these hymns, these verses, chapter 5, verse number 2 uses the word Kapil also. God saw birth of all-knowing Kapil. Kapil also means the golden-colored Hiranyagarbha, one embodying a golden core. Hiranyagarbha has a lot of names, a lot of words, or a lot of, in different contexts, different meanings. So this Upanishad uses the word Kapil. It could mean Hiranyagarbha. And this Upanishad we saw has a beautiful poetic style. Because it's a deep philosophy. But this Upanishad somewhat differs from other Upanishads in the poetry. It's almost like a heart-catching, beautiful poetry. When he says that he is not only a seer of the mantras, but also a poet from his heart. That's what people say about sage Shvetashvarta. Couple of examples. Chapter 4, verse number 2, when he is describing the omnipresence of Brahma. He says, you are woman, you are man, you are boy, and you are girl. You are the shivering old man helped by a stick. You are born in the form of this world. So this was a 4th chapter. Let me see if I can find that verse for you in Sanskrit also, because these verses are so beautiful. So 4th verse number 2. He says, Tvam istri, tvam puman asi, tvam kumara utva kumari, tvam jirnaha dandain vanchasi, tvam jataha bhavasi vishvato mukha. Then in the 4th verse, he says, Nilaha patangaha, haritaha lohitakshaha, tangidarva ritvaha sumudraha, anadimatvam vibhutven vartase yata jatani bhuvanani vishwaha. You are the blue butterfly, the green-eyed parrot, and the lightning cloud. You are the seasons and the seas. You are the one without any beginning. You are omnipresent. All the worlds are born out of you. So that's why it's so enchanting to read these verses also, go through these verses. But remember, the main idea behind this Upanishad is to know ourselves and to know God. Who created all this? Because this was the question. You remember in the very beginning, those spiritual seekers, they said, Kim karnam brahm kutasma jata jivam kem kvacha sampratishtha adhishtatha kena sukh itareshu vartamehe brahma vida vyavastham. That's how this beautiful Upanishad started. They were discussing. They asked, what is the ultimate cause of the world? Is it Brahm? Where have we come from? How do we live? Where do we exist or go after death? O knowers of the reality, under whose governance do we follow the rule regarding joy and sorrow? These were the deep questions in their minds. So these questions were answered by this great Rishi, but at the same time, he is encouraging them and to us also. Live a life of a yogi, not as a bhogi. Because if we just go into the path of the bhog, we will forget ourselves. It's very easy to forget ourselves. We got to remind ourselves. Live a life of a discipline. And that's what the tap is. To remember that, am I living a life of a yogi or a bhogi? Ask yourself. Then we'll have these answers. We will experience the answers which this Rishi gave it to us. So if one thing we have to learn from this great Upanishad is that have a disciplined life. Tapasvi's life. There shouldn't be a day when we don't meditate. There shouldn't be a day when we don't do the seva. There shouldn't be a day when we don't do the prayers. Connect ourselves with God. So this is what I see from this Upanishad, from the mouth of this great Rishi. So now if somebody has a question or if you have a different kind of a take on this Upanishad, we can talk about it.
Hersh, I have a question.
Yes, Niru.
What is Upasana? Because you said this Upanishad has a great part on Upasana.
Yeah, see, yeah.
Isn't Upasana
means,
the bhakti?
Yeah, Upasana means, see, up was. Now, so that means you are sitting near somebody who is higher.
Okay.
Okay, when you are sitting in your temple area, remember you are sitting at the feet of God and the Guru.
Yeah.
Okay, so Upasana really means bhakti, but remember the presence of God also. Just a mere ritualistic bhakti should become a little deeper.
Okay.
Feel the presence of God. Okay, then it becomes Upasana.
Okay.
That's why I mentioned the word Parubhakti.
Okay.
First it's a Parubhakti, just a simple rituals are the Parubhakti, lower level of bhakti. But eventually we got to have a higher level of bhakti, Parubhakti, supreme bhakti, which we learned in the Narad Bhakti Sutra also, these terms. That's why I said that a lot of this information has been taken from this Upanishad and later on See, even Bhagavad Gita came out afterwards. Okay, Upanishads were before. The Bhakti texts also came later on. So a lot of these ideas, these thoughts in these Upanishads are pretty ancient.
Oh, so Ved and Upanishad were before Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad
Yes.
Gita also stemmed from these things.
Yes, exactly the same. Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna said many times. This is not the first time I'm telling you, Arjun.
Okay.
I have told it to Vivaswan. Vivaswan told it to Manu. Manu told it to later on to others.
So
this
that is the chain.
Yeah.
That is the chain. Okay.
Okay.
Got
So
it.
Bhagavad Gita is, that's why we can look at it from the language also, that how old that scripture is.
Yeah.
Okay, the Sanskrit in the Vedas, in the Upanishad is more difficult than the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, Bhagavad Gita is almost like a very close to Hindi language.
Yeah.
We are not used to it, so we think it's very difficult. But Vedic Sanskrit is more difficult because it's ancient. But the truth is the same. Truth doesn't change. Okay. So Bhagavad Gita also says, do your duties, do the meditation, do the prayers, know yourself, and live a life for the benefit of others. Get rid of the selfishness. Learn to live for others. Bhagavad Gita says the same thing. This Upanishad says the same thing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Truth cannot be changed. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Good questions, Neeru. Yes, Veena.
Thank you, Hershji, for a beautiful summary. Can you just highlight a couple of other things which were in this Upanishad? One was about the wheel, and the other one was about the individual soul.
Yeah, see, wheel was, he mentioned this wheel, almost like a Kal Chakra, also he used the term. And I think it was in the first chapter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, if you look at the first chapter, verse number 4, he said, Tam ek nemim trivritam shota shantam shatadharam vishati pratyarabhi. So he is giving a simile as a wheel. And he says that those rishis, in their meditation, they saw him as a wheel. And everything is him only. Whether it was a rim or the tires or the extremities or the spokes or the fasteners, all of it is just him alone. Him means the God.
Okay.
And another thing we can understand from the wheel is the chakra. You never know where it starts and where it ends.
Okay.
That's how this universe is. That's how this creation is. It's a chakra. We think it's only linear. Because bigger the circle, you cut it into a small portion, it looks like linear. But when you have an understanding of the whole wheel or the whole thing, the whole chakra, then you know there is no beginning or end. So this wheel is just a simile for God. That's all.
Okay.
Okay, so everything is him alone. Okay. So even when we, three vrita, he says, those are the three guns. Or short shantaha. So that's the shortest means 16. So Panch Bhoot, Panch Indriya, Panch Karam Indriya, all those, right? So it's all the Prakriti explained in these examples. That's what it is.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And the second question was about the individual soul part.
Yeah, individual soul is nothing but supreme soul. We got to recognize that also. When we feel ourselves, we are separate. It's not the Shuddha Buddha Atma we are recognizing. We are just recognizing only Jivatma. There's a difference between a Jivatma and Shuddha Buddha Atma. When we say my soul, separate from others, that is a Jivatma. With the help of these purifications, with the help of the meditations, we experience that this Atma is nothing but part of Paramatma. And again, it is through the meditation we experience it. Okay. So, any particular verse you are mentioning, or just in general?
No, in general.
In general, that's what it is. Yes.
Because
Okay.
I remember he was talking about two birds sitting on a tree. One is eating and enjoying the fruit, and the other one is just looking.
Yeah. So exactly. That simile was given there too. So when we are enjoying the fruits, then we are identifying ourselves with the Jivatma. Okay. When we are just perfectly peaceful, no bhog, then that is Shuddha Buddha Atma. Okay. So it's like how our face is turned. Is it turned towards the bhog, or is it turned towards yoga? Yeah. So that's why these two birds, this example of two birds is in other scriptures also. So two birds on the same tree. And tree is what? This body. This tree of body, we have the birds inside. The birds can forget the real nature, or they can remember who we are. Okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
And this example of a bird is because birds fly. And ultimately, what happens to this Jivatma? It will fly out of this tree also. Right? Sooner or later, it will get out. Okay?
Yeah,
good.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, Veena. Yes, Nana?
Hershji, when you were talking about Upasana, you said somewhere no guesswork. What does that mean?
No guesswork means it's almost like sometimes we just keep on guessing. Is it? It's almost like a doubting. No doubting. Have a full faith. We got to strengthen our faith. Okay? Otherwise, if we are guessing, then time comes when somebody else might shake us up. That have a firm faith that God is there. God is right there. Even though I cannot see God right now, God is there. So that kind of upasana.
Got it.
We got to strengthen our faith more and more. Unshakable faith, they say. Unshakable. See, just like we have a faith, who our mother is, nobody can shake that us. Nobody can say that, no, this is not your mother. Or our own children, because right now we are mothers and grandmothers. We have a faith. We should have the same kind of a faith. That, yeah, the Ishta Devata I have chosen, it is God. God can have many forms. That's why in this Upanishad also many forms God can have. And God is everywhere. There is no place where God is not. So that kind of a faith. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Hersh.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I'll ask Veena to sing the bhajan. And before the bhajan, let me do the Shanti part also. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Visheshyate Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.